Tonight on Ukraine Today, more than 1 million Russian invaders are gone. How does the Kremlin replace these massive losses and at whose expense? A global threat. Why did the US Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, start talking about nuclear war? A strike on the Muscovy region. Ukrainian drones hit a key facility of Russia's defense industry. Kharkiv under fire. Russia launched drones at residential areas. At least 8 people killed, dozens injured. The American vision for peace. Why did Keith Kellogg's words spark outrage among Ukrainians? All that and more on Ukraine Today. Hi there, we're from Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Robchun. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let's get started. We begin with the first million. In just the past day, Russia lost at least 1,140 soldiers, killed and wounded. That brings the total number of Russian casualties since the full-scale invasion to 1,340,000. Yes, 1,340 invaders. Now let's talk about how the Kremlin is trying to refill these enormous losses and keep its bloody war going.
Russian losses in Ukraine have surpassed 1 million, a record high for the Kremlin in 80 years. Officially, Moscow has only acknowledged the casualties once, back in the fall of 2022. Strangely enough, Putin himself recently indirectly confirmed the massive losses in the army. He boasted to journalists that every month 50 to 60,000 people sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense.
Now, here's the most interesting part. Where do these people go? Forgive me, Lord, people, right? It's a one-way ticket. I've heard for a long time now that contracts are no longer terminated when they expire. They are officially automatically extended. 600, according to Putin, 600 to 700, 20,000 a year, one way. This is not rotation. It's not like some go, come back, and others take their place. This isn't rotation. It's one way only. From this one-way trip, you either end up as a 200th in a body bag or on welfare with severe disability.
Any figures about the war in Ukraine have been classified by the Russian Federation. The project Media Zona keeps track of the 200s. At the moment, their list contains more than 111,000 dead. By name, even this number is far from accurate, but it still gives an idea of what's happening. The so-called volunteers are among the leaders in the number of casualties. The special military operation, as it is called in Russia, has become a ticket to a better life for thousands of Russians. They sign contracts simply because of the poverty in the country of the gas station. They are lured by million-ruble payouts offered by local and federal authorities.
The story of Stanislav Simonov from the small Bashkir town of Beloretsky is telling. It is similar to the path of thousands of other people. He was 51 years old. After finishing school, Stanislav studied at a vocational school to become a locksmith, worked at a metallurgical plant, and in November of last year signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. In November, and already by December 16th, that is literally a month later, he was killed. The story of Simonov is telling in that, firstly, nowadays it is increasingly managed 45 to 50 who are signing contracts. Most volunteers undergo training for only 1 or 2 weeks, and after that they are sent straight to the front. And many of them had never served in the army before. Some had only completed their mandatory military service many, many years ago. Surviving the war in Ukraine with such training, or rather, with a lack of it, is extremely difficult.
The rather advanced age of Russian volunteers indicates that it is becoming harder for commanders to replenish their ranks with them. By the way, those who choose a contract over a courtroom bench are also considered volunteers. Convicts are another category that is being actively mobilized and used as expendables. The practice of recruiting them was started by the now deceased Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. Thanks to him, Russians significantly emptied out the prison cells. But even in the 4th year of the full-scale war, prisoners are still helping to maintain the numbers of the Russian forces in Ukraine. It's possible that they are now being sent to the front by decision of the prison administration. The advantage with them is that you can do whatever you want to them.
I'm already at the training ground. It was made very clear, if you go to fight, that's it. They didn't ask me, they just gathered us up. I even have artificial heart valves, which technically make me unfit for service. But that's what the administration wanted. They gathered us up and sent us off. I wasn't the only one like that. The attitude of the unit commanders, well, specifically when you're on a mission, how they treat you. The last thing I noticed was this. When we were in a group, just the two of us men, a veteran, got wounded when we were coming out of New York, on the pipes. He was wounded by a drone. The next day we explained, we reported that he was wounded The next day, we were handed over to another commander. Another commander got on the radio with us and said, "Get ready, we're leaving now." Well, we remind him that we have 300 veterans. That is, he needed help, he needed to be evacuated. The commander's call sign was Abkhaz. He specifically said, these were his words, "By Valley, if you come back, then I'll come in." Those were the commander's exact words. Then another commander with a different call sign switched in. I don't remember his name. He was yelling over the radio, "Forward, don't only forward." And I also noticed in the unit right away, they beat you with sticks, they beat you up, put you in a cage and beat you with sticks. I had a case like that too. That's how they punish guys who...
For the war in Ukraine, Russians are actively recruiting mercenaries from all over the world. This practice was also started by the Wagner PMC. In more than 3 years, all kinds of people have ended up in the Ukrainian trenches: Cubans, Indians, Chinese. Their discovery has provoked international scandals. From the post-Soviet countries, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Kyrgyz and Belarusians are actively fighting on Russia's side. There are also quite a few mercenaries from Serbia, Syria, Afghanistan and African countries. They are recruited under the pretext of job offers, with promises of high salaries and citizenship.
I understand, Russia, you are being killed. Right now, I want to go to Turkey. I don't want to go to Iraq. I just want to go home. Russia is bad. Bad. I feel very bad. I want to go home.
For thousands of poor people from all over the world, the battlefield in Ukraine has become an attempt to improve their financial situation. So far, neither videos showing piles of corpses nor the way Russians at the front discipline those unwilling to fight have stopped them. But this can't go on forever. Russia's human and financial resources are limited, unless partners from the axis of evil, like North Korea did, deliberately come to its aid. According to intelligence reports, their contingent was the largest.
Also, in the last 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 6 Russian tanks, 3 armored vehicles, 47 artillery systems and dozens of other units of enemy equipment. Ukrainian drones hit the Rezonit technology park in the Muscovy region. This plant produces circuit boards and electronic components for Russia's airspace and defense industry. Meanwhile, Russia attacked Kharkiv. Drones struck residential neighborhoods, damaging apartment buildings, private homes, a store, schools, a kindergarten and many cars. At least 8 people were killed and dozens injured, including 4 children, ages 2, 12, 16 and 17. Once again, we see Ukraine targets Russian military facilities. Russia deliberately kills civilians. And in the middle of all this, an interesting comment from the US Special Envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. At the German Marshall Fund's Brussels Forum, he shared Washington's idea for a peace deal with Russia.
We call it ceasefire in place. Ceasefire in place meaning the ground you are physically on, that is the ground that is yours now. You occupy that. And that's okay. Does this mean de jure or de facto? By law? Or just by the simple fact that you're physically on the ground and as your soldiers are there holding that ground. And then we want to get to that. We want to get to the return of the children, the prisoners that are out there, that made a sustainable ceasefire long-term, sustainable not only for the Ukrainians but for Europe as well. And then try to get the Russians back into what I would call the League of Proper Nations. So everybody's kind of working together. That we're all, there's a level of, you kind of balance it out, meaning you can all live with the results of this for the long term. That's where you want to get something that's sustainable long term. You don't want to do this. We don't want to see a war start again in 3 or 4 or 5 years. You just don't want to go there.
Very interesting. Just hand over Ukrainian territory? Did anyone ask the Ukrainians? So what? The US is ready to encourage the terrorist state to attack again? The Kremlin just heard. Everything Russia managed to grab is now legally yours. Next, the US will try to negotiate other details, but territory is off the table. And tomorrow, Russia invades Finland, occupies part of Estonia, kills and rapes in Latvia and Lithuania. Why stop there? France? Germany? Whatever Russia captures, it gets to keep. And then what? Another deal with the Kremlin? Mr. Kellogg, do you even understand what you're saying? Because statements like this are dangerous, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire world order. And Russia is a global threat. This week alone, NATO fighter jets took off 3 times in response to Russian warplanes over the Baltic Sea. Here's more. US Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard is warning about nuclear war. Meanwhile, Putin's army is moving tanks and artillery to Africa. Details in the report.
Once again, it's a beautiful night over Russia, and this time also over the occupied Crimea. A total of 32 drones were shot down, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense.
The factory is on fire.
Not factory, maybe.
Factory.
That's right. That's the Tambov powder plant burning after a drone attack. And, as always, in Russia they reported that the situation is under control.
As a result of the crash of one of the downed drones, a fire broke out, which was extinguished by fire departments. There were no casualties. Law enforcement agencies are working at the scene. The situation is under control.
Nevertheless, city residents report that there were at least 15 explosions.
First of all, this is a strategic plant that supplies the Russian army with its products. And the fact that it caught fire there and they quickly put it out does not mean that the plant did not sustain visible and quite serious damage at all. After they put out the fire, even their own internal journalists, the war correspondents, wrote that as of today, the supply of certain weapons from this plant will be suspended for 8 months.
Could it be that Prigozhin's legacy lives on? Russia is increasing its military presence in West Africa. Tanks, artillery, and modern electronic warfare systems continue to arrive in the region. There used to be Wagner PMC, and now it's the African Corps.
Most likely, they reached an agreement to form this African Corps. Well, accordingly, most likely, they promised Putin some mines, in return valuable diamonds, gold, or something else. Because Putin needs money right now, and he's ready to agree to any conditions and sell to Africa, not only to supply the African region there, but also to sell equipment and weapons there. That's it. Because the factories of the Russian Federation are currently operating in 3 shifts.
Meanwhile, the head of the Pentagon has announced a reduction in military support for Ukraine. At the same time, it's worth remembering that after coming to power, the Trump administration did not allocate new aid packages. However, deliveries based on decisions made by the previous government are continuing.
Right now, this is not critical. We have reserves, right? We have large reserves of weapons. We've had a shortage of weapons from the very first days, even under the Biden administration. And even though Europe is also helping using words, they seem to be helping by 1,000%. In reality, they're helping by about 30%.
Meanwhile, as the US reduces its aid, the head of Germany's Federal Intelligence Service states that he has evidence that Russia is planning to test the effectiveness of NATO's Article 5. This article guarantees mutual defense in the event of an attack on one of the alliance's member countries.
In my opinion, what could now be targeted by the Russians, and the way I see it, the development plan they envision is the Suwalki corridor. I think the first thing they will do is seize it from the side of Kaliningrad and Belarus, closing off the Suwalki corridor. They will seize it, and the former Baltic states will come under the initial strike of the Russian army.
The situation is also escalating in Finland. There, it was reported that a Russian aircraft likely violated the country's airspace on June 10th. The Border Service is investigating this incident, but a similar violation already occurred on May 23rd. They are also reporting increased Russian activity in the Baltic Sea.
As soon as Europe stops dragging its feet in making policy and starts taking the threat from the Russian Federation seriously, the next aircraft that flies into the territory of Finland, Poland, Romania, or Lithuania will be shot down, just like the Turks do. This sluggish policy only makes Putin think even more that people are afraid of him and encourages him to develop some kind of tactics and strategy for capturing Europe in his sick mind.
Also, against the backdrop of rising tensions in the Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk regions, the zones of mandatory evacuation are being expanded. Due to the escalation of the situation in the Kupiansk district, residents of 7 villages in the Shevchenkivska community are being advised to leave their homes.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It really helps. In Odessa, the summit Ukraine-Southeast Europe brought together representatives of 11 countries: Ukraine, Moldova, Montenegro, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, Albania, North Macedonia and Slovenia. Leaders discussed security, economic cooperation and EU integration. Main topics: protection of Ukrainian critical infrastructure, new export routes and support for Ukraine's path to the European Union. One key detail: Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić joined the summit. He is openly pro-Russian and that was his first visit to Ukraine since the war began. Vučić offered to help rebuild 1 or 2 Ukrainian cities or regions, but he refused to sign the summit declaration. Why? Because it includes a demand to impose sanctions on Russia. Is Hungary preparing to annex Western Ukraine? President Volodymyr Zelensky responded to reports about Hungarian agents operating in Zakarpattia. He explained that revealing this information was meant to show Ukraine knows what's going on. More in our next story.
Espionage and intelligence gathering agents of Hungary have been exposed in Ukraine.
For the first time in Ukraine's history, the security service has uncovered a spy network of Hungarian military intelligence that was conducting espionage activities to the detriment of our country.
Volodymyr Zelensky gave a major interview to a Hungarian portal in which he explained what the Hungarian Military National Security Service was trying to uncover in Zakarpattia. They were interested in information about the locations of Ukrainian air defense systems, military units and the attitudes of Zakarpattia residents toward the possible presence of Hungarian peacekeepers in the region.
We have additional photos and videos of various meetings organized by the Military National Security Service on Hungarian territory, which we will also publish if necessary. I don't want to threaten anyone, but we have records, including how this service paid for its intelligence assets. We have documented everything.
Zelensky noted that the Hungarian network in Ukraine had been developing since 2021, and issues related to military affairs were raised in 2024-2025. The most recent transfer of information took place on March 25 of this year. As a result of comprehensive measures, the security service of Ukraine detained 2 agents from the Hungarian intelligence network.
The investigation established that both individuals were supervised by a career officer of Hungarian military intelligence whose identity has already been identified by the security service.
The head of state emphasized that he is not claiming that Budapest wants anything. But then, for whom is he gathering information? And for what purpose? Moreover, according to the head of state, Putin benefits from the fact that Orban does not help Ukraine.
Friendly countries, well, neighbors, is acting on principles of decency, especially since Hungary is a member of the European Union, which we aspire to join. Do not, let's say, send their agents, do not engage in recruitment in another country, do not conduct reconnaissance on the locations of air defense systems or military units, and do not illegally distribute internal passports, again, taking advantage of local sentiments. A friend doesn't behave like that, a partner doesn't behave like that, and honestly, even a neighbor doesn't act that way.
Vladimir Zelensky also stated that Viktor Orban is using his image for elections in Hungary.
On one of the posters, there's Ursula von der Leyen, Vladimir Zelensky, and the leaders of one of the German parties. And under these far-right slogans, Orban is trying to oppose, let's put it this way, oppose himself to the entire European Union and to all the values that the vast majority of countries share.
The Prime Minister of Hungary could not help but comment on the statement made by the Ukrainian president. And on June 10, Viktor Orban published a short but sharp post in response on his social media page.
President Zelensky attacked us because Hungarians do not want to die for Ukraine. We do not want our children to come back from the front in coffins, and we do not want Hungarian money to go to Ukraine.
The scandalous pro-Russian Prime Minister of Hungary is constantly putting obstacles in Ukraine's way. He speaks extremely negatively about the possibility of Ukraine joining the EU, threatens to block its membership in the Union, and spreads propaganda about the negative consequences for all countries if such a decision is made.
We see from Hungary a position that in some ways echoes Russian propaganda, but Orban has not said that the Russian Federation should seek peace or a ceasefire. Moreover, he blamed the victim of aggression, Ukraine, for all the troubles, which again played into the hands of Russian propaganda. In short, Hungary is about to face a serious internal political confrontation.
Orban also criticizes arms deliveries to Ukraine and sanctions against Russia, saying that they harm the European economy, including Hungary's. He does not support the European Union's tough stance toward Russia and often avoids openly criticizing it.
Orban is facing major electoral problems, and his aggressive policy toward, let's say, Ukraine, when they try to demonize both Ukraine and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, making this the foundation. Yes, the foundation of their propaganda actually speaks to only one thing: Orban's own significant electoral troubles.
In other words, Orban's policies may sooner or later lead to the collapse of his own rule.
That's all for today. Thank you for being with us. We read your comments and we feel your support. Strength to Ukraine defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and see you next time.